Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Chris,
Hello.
with Travis,
Hello.
and in a somewhat unusual move for this, we are also joined by a fourth one tonight, which is Lewis. And we are getting together tonight to talk about Rudyard Kipling's poem, A Child's Garden. Um, as usual, as a quick reminder, if you like my work, if you like what I do, you can support me via subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. And you also I need to make an announcement video about this. I have a backup of this channel on BitChute, BitChute.com. I've had that for some time, and I just added a couple months ago a second backup on BitTube, BITTUBE.TV. So you can follow me on either of those in case YouTube finally decides that I should no longer be on YouTube. It seems wise to plan for that eventuality. So, having said that, Lewis has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight. I am going to put it up on the screen. You guys let me know when when you can see that, and Lewis can start reading it for us, okay?
Sweet. Whenever y'all ready. Alrighty.
Is it up yet?
Yep.
I see it.
Okay.
I even see the black and white of Mr. Kipling's photograph.
Okay, so go ahead, Lewis.
Yeah, as ordered, Captain. Alrighty. This is A Child's Garden by Rudyard Kipling. Now, there is nothing wrong with me, except I think it's called TB, and that is why I have to lay out in the garden all day. Our garden is not very wide, and cars go by on either side, and make an angry hooty noise that rather startles little boys. But worst of all is when they take me out in cars that growl and shake. With car mechanics so dreadfully near, I have to shut my eyes for fear. But when I'm on my back again, I watch the Crydon aeroplane that flies across to France and sings like hitting thick piano strings. When I'm strong enough to do the things I'm truly wishful to, I'll never use a car or train, but always have an aeroplane, and just go zooming round and round, and frighten nursery with the sound, and see the angel side of clouds, and spit on all those motor crowds.
Okay, and thank you, Lewis.
Very nice. Yeah, you did a much better job than I would have. Thanks for taking that on.
I got you, brother. No worries.
By the way, just so it's clear, when I ask if anyone else wants to, I'm usually perfectly willing to do it myself. I'm just putting the option out there. So this is never drafting. Chris, would you like to start us off? Your first thoughts on this?
Well, my first thought is, on the surface, it seems almost inspirational because it's a child, thinking things aren't great now, but they'll be better in the future. These are all the things I want to do. But then that only makes it more depressing when you realize TB is not good. The chances of him surviving are not great. And even if he does, he might not be strong enough to do those things he wants to do. So it's sort of a mixed bag there. But yeah, just like you kind of want to root for him, but his odds aren't great.
Yeah,
sort of an underdog.
So speaking of illness, by the way, I wanted to note, in a change from my usual habits on this program, I'm having a gin and tonic tonight because that has tonic water, which has quinine, which is part of the of a medicine that's apparently effective against COVID-19. So, and I already ate all of our fish tank cleaner yesterday, so this is what I have now. Anyway, but Travis, what did you think of this one?
I guess I was kind of with Chris. I mean, I'm kind of recovering. I didn't actually connect. Like, I knew it was TB, but because it is so light and playful, I didn't even think about the fact that this kid's probably dying. So, like, that adds a whole new, like, layer to the poem for sure.
Well, and it's
yeah, I mean,
and
it's
the other thing is even if he does live, there's which I don't know what the odds of surviving childhood TB were in Victorian England. But even if he does live, there's a pretty good chance this is going to seriously hamper the rest of his life, because that would have there would be lung damage from that. But go ahead, keep going.
So I mean it's interesting to me. I mean, the first read, it's like, oh, here's a kid, he's not feeling well, daydreaming about having an airplane, and spitting on the crowds below. I mean, it's such a little boy thing to do. It's like there's nothing wrong with his imagination, clearly, or his desire to be out there doing things. But it also points out, the things that are frightening, the sound of the traffic, even in his garden, and then especially whenever he's out there.
By the way, I should have. I meant to mention this before, because I had to look this up, not a word I'm familiar with. So, charabancs is a bus. I don't know when the term changed, but yeah, charabancs would have been what we call a bus.
Yeah,
or
I think
what?
It's a specific type of bus that had like an open top or something.
Oh, okay,
like
gotcha.
the double decker.
That's possible. I didn't get that level of detail, but yeah, that's what that one is. Anyway, go ahead, Travis. You keep going.
I was just gonna. I mean, I have significant health issues that I'm dealing with. And so there is kind of this seesawing between hope and, escape, and just sort of the hard fact that, yeah, you're not well and it doesn't look good. So it's, I don't know. It's an interesting poem. I don't have much more than that at the moment, but.
Lewis, how about you? What are your first thoughts on this one?
Speaking as a kid that had a lot of respiratory problems when I was younger, especially with bronchitis and stuff like that, I kind of relate to this kid on a multiple different levels, and the very fact that he imagines zooming on an airplane, flying high above everything, just rising above everything, including the world's noises, the difficulties, even his disease, through imagination. It's kind of an inspiration to others to see beyond your problems, to see beyond the right here, which is in some cases miserable, and to see above to the clouds, to things that are better, more inspiring, something to look forward to help you get through the hard times.
Well, and it's it's a very Christian. I mean, one of the cardinal. It's not card. There's one of the theological virtues. That's the word I was looking for. Of Christianity. There's the 4 cardinal virtues, which is prudence, temperance, justice, and courage. I think so, yeah. And there's the three theological virtues, which are faith, hope, and love. And hope is one of the Christian virtues that you always regardless of where you are, you always look forward to the possibility of something better. That doesn't mean that you're like, oh, things are gonna always work out for the best. But it also means you don't surrender to despair. You don't say, well, we're done, we're giving up, it's over. There is, hope is, part of the Christian spirit, and so yeah. So I picked this poem for the channel cause like the first thing is Rudyard Kipling is a fascinating poet. I've covered several of his before, and he's just really he can be really powerful. But then when I found this one, I just found it interesting because this is not what I think of when I think of Rudyard Kipling. Like when I think of Rudyard Kipling, I think of these big these big philosophical issues, or empire, and how we're going to keep civilization running. The gods of the copybook headings kind of thing. And instead you have just this little poem that's a kid who's has a serious illness, and how he deals with it, and it's cute, and it's bittersweet, and it's like I said, it's Rudyard Kipling poem, and definitely his quality of work. It's not what I would have expected of him, and I found that kind of cool.
Also, just as a side note, Rudyard Kipling also wrote stuff, just kind of building on your whole idea of something that you wouldn't really expect from Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling actually wrote Jungle Book, which is literally about a kid who is abandoned / lost in the jungle. So that could take a horrific turn, but then he turns it around. He anthropomorphizes the animals. He gives them compassion. He has the child raised by wolves.
Some of them have compassion.
Very true. So but he kind of takes that kind of leads into the whole bittersweet analogy of like things that you actually pointed out rather poignantly, that he talks about empire building. He talks about big, huge things, and then he turns around and writes Jungle Book, which is about one person, one teeny little forgotten kid.
And so, he has some range, I guess you could say. He covers a lot of territory, and he does it well. And so, Chris, you have anything in particular you wanted to take a look at?
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of interesting how he contrasts the two different types of vehicles, because it would be pretty easy to imagine that for a kid that's trapped in the garden all day, can't really move around, it would be very easy for a car to be that symbol of freedom. But in his case, not only does it scare him when he hears it so close to the garden, but also if you think about the type of car rides he would be used to, it would probably be going back and forth to the doctor or the hospital for treatment. And then it's also going to be vehicles closely packed together. So in his mind, that's basically just another prison. It's just another small garden. Whereas the airplane, you never see two airplanes flying next to each other. If you do, something's gone wrong. But there is sort of the more sense of you're still in a very confined area physically, but you still have like so many more possibilities. You could go up, down, and then also he has no experience with an airplane ride taking him to somewhere he doesn't want to be. So just that contrast between the two vehicles and his personal experience with them, like the one that he's unfamiliar with being the sort of idea of hope, and the one he's familiar with just being another type of misery. I think that's sort of interesting.
Well, and the other thing, just on a kind of practical level, he sees these airplanes, way up above, that flies to France and sings like hitting thick piano strings, and from where he is, what he hears is this and this kind of harmonious thing. But if he was actually there in that airplane, especially given how they were built at the time, it probably would have been noisy and scary and and obnoxious to him then as well.
Plus, the turbulence would have been unsettlingly rattling.
Yeah, and so it's also kind of funny just looking at the difference, I guess, between actuality and expectations. What we have actually experienced and what we're kind of what we kind of imagine things to be when we haven't seen them up close. And all of us have that experience of things that we like. Oh, well, someday when I get to do this, it's gonna be like this, and this, and then you get there and it's like there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that, but there's a lot of all these other things that you didn't think about, and you're like, oh, I have to deal with that too. And so it's kind of an adult perspective on this child's poem.
Right. And it gets back to the sort of depressing themes, that there's a sense of irony that from his perspective there's hope, but from our adult perspectives, like, we realize that his hope is built like on ignorance, and that he probably would not feel fulfilled by it even if he achieved it. But at the same time, if he had the strength to do that, then that means he will have recovered. Basically, if he gets disappointed by realizing his dreams and being disappointed by them, that's kind of the best case scenario, because it means he lived long enough and was strong enough to attempt it.
Well, and one other thing, which I didn't think of until actually we were talking about it here, especially with the terms he uses, with the last stanza, but always have an aeroplane and just go zooming round and round, ... and see the angel side of clouds. You could almost read that as him dying, and his soul leaving his body, metaphorically ascending to heaven. And I don't think you have to. I don't think that's the only. I don't think that's necessarily what Kipling was writing into this, but that is definitely a way of looking at this, and it's like it. I don't know, that definitely casts some more kind of somber light on the whole thing. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that sound plausible?
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me. I mean, I can see that being in there, and he's a pretty smart dude, so he probably did mean for it to sort of touch on both things, most likely.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying is I don't think that's necessarily. I don't think he wrote it as this is a metaphor of him dying, and that is what this poem means, and that is how it should be taught in your English classes. Which there's actually a poem by Robert Frost, and I'm not going to name it, but where like I read it and then like years later people are like, oh yeah, that poem's about suicide, and I'm like, what? Okay. And it's like, I guess maybe, but it doesn't have to be. And so it's and so like I kind of dislike the hammering on, oh, this poem means this one thing, period. And it's like, well, no. If it means this one thing, period, it's really not a very good poem.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that the original audience would have been much more familiar with tuberculosis, however you say that word, TB. Yeah. So as soon as they would have read the second line, they would have realized how dire this kid's situation is. And the idea of him dying would be it'd be a lot easier for them to grasp. That might be one of the first things they think of. So whenever you already have that sort of expectation, and then you throw in the word angel, it's like you have to know on some level you're throwing that imagery out there.
Yeah, there's that. One thing, Travis, were you gonna?
No, I was just agreeing with him. I mean, I do have something to say, but you could go with yours first if you want. I kind of wanted to go back to the whole hope concept that you were putting out there. And I have this ongoing discussion with myself about hope. Is it really hope or is it just illusion? I mean, really. Because, just like this boy, he's got this fantasy about what's going to be and how it's going to be better. But it's a fantasy. And even as you were saying, whatever version of that he might be lucky enough to experience, it's only going to be a version of that fantasy. But our fantasies do keep us going.
It's also kind of rooted in faith, which is a presupposition with an absence of data. So trusting in something that you don't know, even though you have no proof, there's something to be said about that. There's something to be said about hoping for the future. There's something to be said about, because if you go with the statistics and the mathematical brutality of it, you're just going to quit and give up because it's like, okay, yeah, the odds are against me. There's something to be said about hope, about going against the tide, engaging in the struggle so that you beat the odds. It's the classic underdog tale.
If you don't, like, if you hope, if you have hope and you fight for something difficult, you may very well fail. But if you don't have hope, you're never even going to try, and you're never going to see what could have been. And so it's, I mean, and yeah, it is it's always that, balance. What is realistic hope? What is, what's the difference between hope and,
delusion?
And deluding yourself. Yeah. And it's
an excellent question I ask myself every day.
But it's also I think part of it, and I don't think I'm breaking any major new philosophical ground here, but I think part of it might be the how much you actually have to put in to this. Like, if you hope that you're going to win the lottery, well, that one's probably more or less delusion, and it's going to make you stupid because you're hoping for something from nothing. But if you hope that if you study hard and if you study hard and you work on and you put together a good resume and take care of your appearance and make a good impression that you'll get that job, well, that's one you can put something into. Where's that noise coming from?
Somebody snacking.
I don't know.
Chris, was that you?
That was not me.
I crossed my arms. Maybe that did it.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, like
how dare you cross your arms?
Like hope. If the hope involves something that you are working, that involves you working towards it, not just like, oh, this should just fall into my lap. I think there's a lot more validity to that kind of thing. I don't know.
And then there's also the case that like just the struggle itself can be the thing that makes you stronger. So like, yeah, if he does come to like riding an airplane, he might be very disappointed in how that turns out. But on the other hand, like if he was able to push himself to that point, that means he is a stronger person. Like
true.
He may find that flying a plane is not what he wants to do, but by that point he will have grown and matured, and he would be in a better spot to find out what he actually wants to do.
We could also take that to an extreme as well, because this kid.
So here's a question stemming from that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Travis. Travis, you there?
Sorry, that was you were all underwater. Yeah, I'm here now. You guys were all underwater for a second.
Okay.
I didn't actually get what Lewis said.
But no, go ahead. What you were
Is Lewis
starting?
still there?
Yeah, go ahead, Travis. Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say, someone asked me this once, when I was young, and I had a very, quick response. So, but I'll ask all of you. I come to question my response. Do you think it's true that anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
I don't believe that's true in a linear way, but I do believe that, for instance, there are things that can happen to you physically that make you physically weaker permanently. But on the other hand, you can learn from that, and you can use that to become a stronger person, like, say, mentally. There are ways you can turn that around if you can try.
I think I've heard that as I've heard one version of that, which, I mean, it's translated from German, so I mean it's an approximation in any case, because that's from Nietzsche, I believe. I think I've heard that as anything that does not kill you can kill us, can only make us stronger, and I think if you take out the only, if you take out that only, I think there's a lot of truth to it. Because it depends on how you respond to it.
That is true.
And like, there's nothing. If it doesn't kill you, you can choose. You can choose to react to it in a way, whatever it is, that you come stronger out of the other end. And like, what's his you can think of, Stephen Hawking. Like, I mean, physically, he was reduced to almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have let that, completely, destroy him, emotionally, mentally as well. And instead, but how he chose to deal with that. I mean, and it's also dependent on what other capabilities you already have. He probably would have been pretty smart in any case, but he didn't. He chose not to let that utterly destroy him, and he may have ultimately come out of that stronger in a way, and done some pretty impressive things. So I don't think it's necessarily true. I think it's up to you.
If I can build on that real quick, there was actually a really hidden, very deep philosophical idea that was hidden in, now bear with me guys, in a Batman movie called The Dark Knight. At one point in time, the Joker said, "I believe what does not kill you makes you stranger." Now, as granted, this was coming from a villain and all, but think about it. If it doesn't kill you, you have two choices. One, you can either choose to make it improve you, pass you through the kiln and the crucible of pain and difficulty to make you something stronger and more versatile, more durable, or you can let it consume you and destroy you in the fire. Granted, in either case, you're not going to be dead, but you will have been changed. So, what doesn't kill you is going to make you stranger. So, whether it makes you stronger or destroys you is up to you.
Well, I mean, that you could even take that to mutations. I mean, what is a mutation but something strange that happens? But sometimes,
most of them,
what's that?
most of them kill the organism.
Most of them do, but some of them don't.
Oh,
and it's the organism that survives.
Evolution, baby.
So one thing which I found really interesting about this poem, because this is written, kind of to be in the voice of a little boy. I assume Rudyard Kipling did not write this as a child. I could be wrong. There's one poem on this channel I have by Alexander Pope that was written when he was 12. He wrote something when he was 12 that people are still talking about 300 years later. And I say that, and then I'm like, why is it worth me breathing? Anyway, but so one thing, pretty like I said, this is written in the voice of a child, and I find really impressive is that the language he uses is both poetic and it's also something that an actual little boy might say. That flies across to France and sings like hitting thick piano strings. Hitting thick piano strings. I could hear like a 9 or 10-year-old boy talk like that. Or the angel side of clouds. It's like the top, the part we don't get to see. But again, it's a poetic way to say it, and it's also I could totally see that as a child's way of explaining that, and I find that a pretty fascinating trick that Kipling pulled off in this.
I believe it.
Yeah. And then also it's a simple rhyme scheme, but it works for what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it's rhyming. Yeah, it's simple. It's rhyming couplets. I'm trying to see. I should have done this before. Oh, okay. There's a couple places.
It felt too childish to me when I first read it, and then I realized that it was a child, so I was able to go back and read it with a little less judgment.
Well, yeah. I mean, childish kind of is the point, and like I said, I think he got that as well as, like I said, using language, using the using poetic language. I also think it's kind of funny how let's see, cars go by on either side and make an angry hooty noise that rather startles little boys, and is like, those cars scare him, but he doesn't want to admit that. So he's like, that rather startle little boys. Like, I'm not scared, they just startle me.
And it would startle any little boy, not just me.
It startled grown men.
Right. Well, yeah, he actually takes the attention off of himself when he says it startles little boys. That's just a generic out there. It doesn't scare me.
Also, you got to remember that back in the day, they didn't have the meep, meep horns of today. They had the horns of back then, which were closer to trains than anything else. uh, yep.
What else? I don't know. Well, so I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to say about this. Chris, any other major points you wanted to?
Well, I do also think it's interesting. Okay, so like one of the, I don't know if it was thought of as a cure or just like sort of therapeutic treatments of TB was to, put people like outside, like the rich people would, go to a country estate or something, but poor people just, go out into the garden. But this poor kid apparently is in like the midst of urban sprawl, where if there are like cars that close to him, and this is probably what in England somewhere, like that air probably was not very therapeutic. So unfortunately, that might have been like more harm than good.
I can just
which,
imagine.
at least
kid.
psychologically, that's definitely the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Travis, any last thoughts from you here? Anything we didn't hit?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. Lewis, anything else you wanted to cover on this poem?
Oh, just something really quick. A quick thought. Covering the previous idea of just going out into the garden and trying to recuperate from a disease, trying to relax, trying to not quite zen, but definitely just try to chill out and calm down, even with the brrrr of cars in the background. Till when you're just about to fall asleep. Just have a horn in the background and you just jump out of your chairs like, what was that? I can just imagine this poor child trying and just having that experience, which I think you're right. I think you accurately pointed out it would traumatize a child.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this one, and God be with you.
Amen, brother.
Have a good one.